Awaken your spirit-chosen ones. Nothing truly changes at midnight except the story you keep telling yourself. That's the lie most people believe, that tonight is just another date on the calendar. Same habits, same thoughts, same excuses, just with a new clock watching. But history doesn't move that way, and neither do people who eventually break out of ordinary lives. Here's a quiet fact most never notice. The human brain doesn't register time by calendars. It registers it by decisions. Neuroscientists have found that when someone makes a firm, internal decision, the brain begins reorganizing behavior before any visible action happens. Meaning the shift comes first in the mind, not in the outcome. By the time the world notices, the change has already been underway for a while. That's why real transformations look sudden from the outside and feel long overdue on the inside. And that's where tonight sits. Not as a magical moment, not as a cosmic reward, but as the exact point where self-negotiation starts to feel embarrassing, where you realize you've been incredibly patient with a version of yourself that keeps promising soon, soon after this, soon when things calm down, soon when motivation feels better, because apparently motivation is on vacation and didn't leave a forwarding address. There's a strange kind of humor in it when you think about it. People will stay stuck for years waiting for a sign, while ignoring the fact that awareness itself was the sign. No thunder, no announcement, just a growing discomfort with repeating a life that no longer fits. This isn't about becoming special overnight, it's about becoming honest. Honest about what you've outgrown. Honest about what you've tolerated. Honest about the quiet truth you've known but kept postponing because it asked too much of you. Tonight isn't here to flatter you. It's here to corner you in a calm, undeniable way. Because once you see what you're actually becoming, pretending otherwise takes more effort than moving forward. And that's exactly what this is about. Number 1, you will become unrelatable to the life you were trying to fit into. At first, it doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic break, no big argument, no sudden exit. It starts quietly, almost politely. Conversations feel longer than they should. Jokes land, but they don't land inside you anymore. You listen, you nod, you even laugh sometimes, but something in you has already stepped back. Not because the people are bad or the life is wrong, but because it no longer belongs to the person you're becoming. You'll notice it when old routines feel heavy instead of comforting. Places you once escaped to now feel like holding rooms. You're still welcome there, but you're no longer at home. The strange part is that nothing outside has changed. Only you have. That's what makes it confusing. You start wondering if you're being difficult, distant, or ungrateful. You're not. You're just no longer willing to shrink your thinking to stay connected. This is where most people panic. They rush to explain themselves, to reinsert enthusiasm, to prove they're still the same. But you won't. Not because you're cold, but because pretending now feels dishonest. You begin to value alignment over belonging. And that shift is irreversible. Being unrelatable doesn't mean becoming arrogant or isolated. It means your internal standards have changed. You're less impressed by noise and more sensitive to substance. You notice how often conversations revolve around complaints, distractions, and recycled dreams. You don't judge it. You just don't feed on it anymore. There's a quiet grief in this stage. You miss who you were allowed to be before growth demanded more of you. You miss the ease of fitting in without effort. But you also feel a relief you can't explain. For the first time, you're not performing your life. You're living it from the inside out. Eventually, you stop trying to be understood by spaces that only knew your old shape. You don't burn bridges. You simply stop crossing them out of habit. And in that stillness, something stabilizes. You realize outgrowing a life isn't betrayal. It's proof that you listened when your inner voice started speaking clearly. Number 2. You will stop romanticizing your suffering and start using it. There comes a moment when pain stops feeling poetic. The stories you once told yourself about how much you've been through begin to sound repetitive, even tiring. Not because what happened to you didn't matter, but because you finally realize that replaying it doesn't move your life forward. It only keeps you emotionally occupied. And that's when something shifts. You start seeing how suffering can quietly turn into an identity. It gives you language, attention, and sometimes sympathy. It even gives you an excuse to pause your growth without fully admitting you're afraid to move. Letting go of that is uncomfortable. There's no applause for choosing responsibility over storytelling. No one claps when you stop explaining your wounds and start asking what they taught you. Using your pain doesn't mean denying it or acting like it made you stronger in some dramatic way. It means extracting truth from it. You notice patterns. You see where you ignored your instincts, where you stayed too long, where you compromised yourself to keep peace. Pain becomes information, not decoration. This is where the tone changes. You stop reliving moments for emotional release and start reviewing them for clarity. You become practical with your past. Instead of asking why it happened, you ask how it shaped your boundaries, your standards, and your awareness. That's when healing stops being about feeling better and starts being about thinking clearer. There's also a loss here. When you stop romanticizing suffering, you lose the comfort of being seen as the one who endured so much. People may even notice you talk less about your past. That's not avoidance, it's efficiency. You're no longer dragging old weight into new rooms. And quietly, almost without announcement, your energy changes. You become harder to manipulate because you recognize emotional traps. You trust your discomfort sooner. You act earlier, instead of enduring longer. The pain that once slowed you down now sharpens your decisions. At this stage, your past no longer introduces you, it instructs you. You don't wear it like a badge or hide it like a secret. You use it like a tool. And once pain becomes useful, it loses its power to control you. Number 3, you will become dangerous to systems that rely on your confusion. It's subtle at first. People don't notice until you stop following the unspoken scripts that once kept you in line. Systems, whether workplaces, social circles, or even family structures, thrive on predictability. They like it when you don't question instructions, when you accept roles quietly, when you don't see patterns that aren't meant to be seen. The moment your mind clears, you stop being convenient. You start noticing inefficiencies, hypocrisies, and the ways energy is being drained, sometimes without anyone admitting it. Being dangerous doesn't mean loud or aggressive. It means unpredictable. It means you move through spaces with a clarity that makes others uncomfortable. People who once guided your choices, subtly or not, start sensing that you're no longer under their influence. That small shift terrifies systems because they rely on confusion, distraction, and compliance to maintain control. You haven't changed the rules, they're the same, but your perception has. Suddenly, everything that worked while you were unsure starts to feel hollow, even manipulative. You'll find yourself challenging things internally first. You'll see agreements that were never in your interest, compromises you made without thinking, and loyalty that was expected but never earned. And slowly, you'll act differently. You won't ask permission to think. You won't wait for approval to make moves. You'll make decisions that are uncomfortable for others simply because they make sense to you. The irony is delicious. People spend years trying to protect themselves from overt threats, while the real danger is the one who quietly refuses to be deceived. You become that person. Not with noise, but with presence. Not with rebellion, but with awareness. This is the first step toward autonomy. The systems you once relied on begin to crack, not because they're fragile, but because you no longer feed them the confusion they depend on. Your clarity becomes contagious and threatening at the same time. And in that quiet disruption, you realize that the power of being understood, focused, and self-directed is more formidable than anything external could ever be. Number 4, you will lose the need to explain yourself even when misunderstood. There's a strange freedom in realizing that you don't owe anyone a justification for your choices. Most of life is spent explaining, defending, and translating who you are so others can understand it. You explain your actions at work, your decisions in relationships, your habits, your failures, even your successes. You think it's necessary, polite, or expected, but at some point that need disappears. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a heavy coat slipping off your shoulders. Being misunderstood used to sting. You would replay conversations, write mental apologies, or try to clarify your intentions endlessly. Tonight, that energy stops. You see that misunderstanding isn't always a mistake. It's often just a reflection of someone else's perspective. Their interpretation says more about them than it does about you. You no longer feel compelled to correct it, because the truth of your own path matters more than the approval of anyone else. This isn't coldness or detachment. It's clarity. You focus on alignment rather than validation. You learn to hold your peace in situations where arguments used to exhaust you. You stop leaking energy into spaces where your essence is irrelevant or misread, and as a result, your presence becomes heavier in the right way. People notice, even if they don't fully understand. There's an unspoken confidence in this. When you stop explaining, you stop shrinking. You stop diluting your actions to make others comfortable. Every word you speak, every choice you make, carries weight simply because it's unfiltered by the need to be understood. It's liberating, but disorienting. Some will resist. Some will misjudge your silence as arrogance or apathy. That's their problem, not yours. The shift isn't about controlling perception. It's about reclaiming energy you've been giving away for years. Once you step into this state, misunderstandings no longer threaten you. You stop bending toward external expectations. You stop negotiating your reality to fit someone else's story. And in that stillness, you discover the subtle power of simply being undeniably yourself. Number 5, you will recognize that comfort was the real enemy, not fear. For years, fear has been the convenient villain in your story. You blame fear for missed opportunities, delayed decisions, and unexplored paths. But the truth hits hard. Fear didn't hold you back nearly as much as comfort did. Comfort disguised itself as safety, as routine, as enough. It whispered that staying the same was fine, that delaying change was responsible, and that avoidance was self-care. You thought you were cautious, you were lazy, you thought you were protecting yourself, you were postponing yourself. Comfort is sneaky. It doesn't roar, it doesn't slap you awake. It quietly dims your ambition, slows your steps, and convinces you that settling is sensible. You stay in relationships that drain you, jobs that bore you, and habits that numb you, all under the banner of "I'm avoiding risk." And meanwhile, fear looks menacing, dramatic, noticeable, but it's often small compared to the months, years, decades you spend politely staying in the wrong place because it's easy. Tonight, that illusion cracks. You notice how much of your life was built around convenience instead of challenge. You see the walls you accepted, the ceilings you didn't push through, the moments you let slip because the alternative required discomfort. It's uncomfortable to realize that the enemy you spent so long fighting was quietly sitting in your chair, smiling while you called yourself brave. This awareness changes everything. You begin chasing growth instead of ease. You start leaning into moments that feel awkward, stretching into situations that feel inconvenient, and prioritizing alignment over comfort. Every choice becomes a test. Will this challenge me, or will it soothe me? You learn to recognize the soft trap of safe enough and reject it even when it tempts you with temporary relief. And strangely, the fear you once feared starts to shrink in comparison. When comfort loses its power, the real obstacles, hard decisions, demanding work, unflinching honesty, become your allies instead of threats. You step into discomfort deliberately, and in doing so, you finally feel alive. Because the life worth having is never easy, and tonight you start to accept that truth fully. Number 6. You will stop waiting for permission that was never coming. For years, you've been conditioned to seek approval, signals, signs, and green lights before making your move. You waited for someone to tell you it was your turn, for circumstances to be perfect, for the universe to hand you consent on a silver platter. And while you waited, life kept moving, indifferent to your hesitation. Tonight, that waiting ends. You realize that permission was never a requirement. It was an illusion, a trap designed to keep you paused while the world went on without you. No one is going to hand you validation. No one is going to tell you, yes, now you're ready. The truth is, readiness is an internal decision, not a stamp from an external authority. When you finally accept this, a weight lifts off your shoulders. You stop hesitating over what others might think, and you start moving according to your own clarity. Every plan, every choice, every step forward is now sanctioned only by one person. You. This shift changes your energy completely. You move with intention rather than expectation. The anxiety of seeking approval disappears, replaced by the strange, uncomfortable power of self-reliance. People who used to control you indirectly, through praise, criticism, or passive pressure, suddenly lose their influence. You're no longer negotiating for permission to live your own life. You've taken it, quietly and irrevocably. It's also a lonely kind of freedom at first. Some people will misunderstand your sudden decisiveness. Some will resist, thinking you're reckless or arrogant. That's inevitable. You learn quickly that external comfort is never required for internal clarity. What matters is that you move in alignment with your truth, not the expectations of those who don't share your vision. And once this decision is made, a new rhythm emerges. You start creating, acting, and choosing without waiting. Momentum builds naturally because it's fueled by certainty, not hesitation. Tonight, the invisible chain of permission breaks. You step into your life fully, aware that the only approval you'll ever need is your own, and that alone is enough to change everything. Number 7. You will notice how often people benefit from you staying the same. Once your clarity sharpens, a strange awareness begins to emerge. You start seeing patterns in relationships, workplaces, and social circles that were invisible before. Suddenly, it becomes obvious how often certain people have thrived while you were playing small, while you were compromising, while you were waiting for permission to step into your own life. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just convenient, but it's unmistakably real. The truth is, your stagnation has been profitable to others, and your growth threatens that balance. You'll notice it in subtle ways first. Compliments that feel more like obligations. Advice that isn't meant to guide you, but to keep you tethered. Opportunities that come with strings designed to maintain your compliance. Even friendships that gently, almost politely, discourage change under the guise of loyalty. These people don't need you to fail. They just need you to stay predictable, because predictable you is easier to control, to rely on, and sometimes to manipulate. The awakening is uncomfortable, because it forces honesty. You realize that some of the resistance you've experienced wasn't personal, wasn't about your worth, and wasn't about timing. It was about others' comfort with you not stepping fully into yourself. And that understanding is both empowering and disorienting. It clarifies the boundaries you need and highlights who actually deserves your energy. Once you see it, your decisions start to shift. You stop bending, shrinking, and accommodating to maintain the status quo. You stop investing in environments that only profit from your restraint. And with that shift comes a subtle power. People notice you differently now, not because you demand recognition, but because you are no longer quietly submitting to their convenience. It's a sobering kind of clarity. The realization that your presence has been quietly profitable for some and inconvenient for others changes how you move through life. You stop apologizing for growing, stop feeling guilty for creating space for yourself, and start valuing your own trajectory above the comfort of anyone else. In that awareness, your evolution becomes unstoppable. Number 8, you will become allergic to shallow motivation. There comes a point when pep talks, inspirational quotes, and loud, empty hype start to feel insulting rather than helpful. You realize that most of what passes for motivation isn't meant to push you forward. It's designed to keep you entertained, distracted, or temporarily energized without demanding real effort. The moment you develop clarity, you can no longer waste energy on superficial stimulation. You need depth, purpose, and truth. Anything less feels hollow, even frustrating. Shallow motivation gives you a sugar rush of excitement that fades the moment reality hits. You've been there, listening to someone's rousing speech or scrolling through 1,000 feel-good posts, only to sit in the same patterns hours later. The problem isn't that motivation doesn't exist, it's that you are looking in the wrong places. Motivation that doesn't require struggle, commitment, or accountability is meaningless. And once you realize that, your relationship with inspiration changes entirely. You start seeking sources that demand more than applause. You want lessons that challenge your thinking, that confront your excuses, that force discomfort and reflection. You notice who around you feeds empty hype versus who pushes for real growth. You stop indulging in quick fixes or feel-good routines because you've experienced firsthand how easily they collapse under real pressure. This shift comes with a subtle arrogance, not of ego, but of discernment. You can smell superficiality from a mile away. You no longer tolerate advice that isn't grounded in action, nor praise that isn't rooted in honesty. You begin to prioritize alignment over entertainment, integrity over excitement, and discipline over emotional highs. At first, it feels isolating. Most people are still addicted to surface-level motivation, seeking comfort in loud words and fleeting energy. You've outgrown that. You're now tuned into a different frequency, one that resonates with effort, resilience, and results. And in that space, your progress accelerates because every move you make is fueled by substance, not spectacle. You no longer chase temporary highs, you build permanent momentum. Number 9, you will stop confusing busyness with progress. Most people live their lives mistaking motion for momentum. They fill their days with tasks, meetings, messages, and obligations, convincing themselves that doing more equals moving forward. But tonight, you start to see the difference. Busyness isn't achievement. It's noise. It's a clever disguise for avoidance. You realize that you've spent countless hours doing things that looked productive on the surface, but didn't bring you closer to what actually matters. This realization hits hard because it forces honesty. You look back and recognize how often you were distracted by low-value activity, convincing yourself that you were working on yourself or preparing for the future, when really you were hiding from the uncomfortable action that would actually change your life. Filling your schedule felt safe, Acting on real priorities felt risky. And that's where the distinction between busyness and progress becomes crystal clear. From this point on, your decisions become sharper. You start asking not, "What can I do today?" but "What action today actually moves me closer to my goal?" You stop investing energy into the trivial, the performative, the convenient. Meetings, conversations, and commitments are filtered through a new lens. Do they serve growth or just fill time? Every hour becomes intentional instead of incidental. The clarity is liberating, but also unsettling. You notice how many people around you remain busy without meaning, and you see how easy it is to get caught in their rhythm. You no longer allow yourself to be swept into the illusion that movement equals improvement. Progress requires discomfort, focus, and decision. It doesn't come from being overextended or constantly visible. And as this shift settles in, your life begins to condense and sharpen. You achieve more with less because every action has purpose. The frantic energy of constant motion gives way to deliberate steps, and suddenly, time that once slipped through your fingers starts producing results. You realize that real forward movement is quiet, precise, and often invisible to those still mistaking busyness for accomplishment. Once that distinction clicks, nothing about your life can remain the same. Number 10. You will accept that being chosen doesn't mean being protected. One of the hardest truths you'll ever face is that no recognition, no talent, no alignment with destiny guarantees safety. Being chosen, whatever that means in your life, isn't a shield. It doesn't come with warnings, cushions, or immunity from pain. People often confuse being selected or acknowledged with being untouchable, and that illusion keeps them fragile, waiting for a safety net that doesn't exist. Tonight, you start to understand that protection has never been automatic. It has always been your responsibility. This realization hits differently because it's both terrifying and liberating. You begin to notice how much energy you've spent hoping for intervention, divine timing, or someone else's approval to keep you safe. All those hours of waiting could have been used to prepare, to strengthen, to sharpen. Once you accept that being chosen doesn't exempt you from failure, betrayal, or loss, you start seeing challenges not as threats, but as necessary training. Life doesn't owe you ease just because it has called your name. With this awareness comes a shift in mindset. You no longer wait for circumstances to align in your favor. You stop blaming luck or unfairness for setbacks. Instead, you focus on control over what you can influence: your preparation, your resilience, your adaptability. Being chosen is no longer a passive privilege. It becomes an active responsibility. Every action matters because no external force is going to intervene if you falter. This understanding changes how you approach relationships, opportunities, and risk. You stop expecting shields and start building armor. You stop hoping for soft landings and start learning how to fall without breaking. And strangely, that acceptance gives you power. When danger is no longer a surprise, when difficulty is no longer an insult, you navigate life with a calm precision that most people never achieve. Being chosen, you realize, isn't about avoiding challenges. It's about facing them with clarity, courage, and discipline. Protection is internal, and the moment you embrace that truth, everything you thought depended on luck or favor becomes your responsibility and your opportunity. Number 11. You will outgrow people without needing to villainize them. Growth is a strange, silent force. It doesn't always announce itself with fireworks or confrontations. Sometimes it simply shifts your energy, your priorities, and your perception, leaving the people around you behind without any dramatic declaration. You start noticing that conversations feel smaller, values feel misaligned, and the paths that once overlapped now run in parallel. The people you once leaned on, laughed with, or confided in might no longer fit the version of yourself you're becoming. And that's okay. Outgrowing isn't about blame. It's about evolution. What makes this difficult is the instinct to villainize. When someone no longer resonates with your growth, the mind naturally looks for reasons, excuses, or faults. You could say they failed you, didn't support you, or resisted your change. But the truth is simpler. Growth doesn't need permission, and it isn't contingent on others. Outgrowing people is not betrayal. It's a natural consequence of becoming more aligned with your own path. You'll realize that relationships are fluid. People serve seasons of your life, not necessarily the entirety. Some accompany you only through learning, some through hardship, and some through comfort. When your needs, goals, and energy shift, those connections may no longer provide mutual benefit. That's not a failing. It's clarity. And you don't have to justify it to anyone, nor do you need to dramatize it. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, your focus narrows, your presence shifts, and the ones who truly align with you remain, while the rest fade without conflict. This process teaches a subtle kind of power. You learn to value alignment over familiarity, depth over history, and your trajectory over comfort. Outgrowing doesn't require drama. It doesn't demand resentment or proof. You simply move forward with awareness, intention, and an unshakable commitment to yourself. In this space, the energy you've been wasting trying to fit or defend evaporates, leaving room for connections and opportunities that match the person you are becoming. And in that stillness, you discover freedom, clarity, and a quiet confidence that no one left behind can take away. Number 12. You will stop outsourcing your intuition to consensus. For a long time, you've looked to others to confirm what you already knew deep down. You've waited for approval, sought validation, and measured your decisions against popular opinion. You convinced yourself that the collective could see more clearly than you could, that safety lay in agreement, and that certainty was found in the majority. Tonight, that illusion dissolves. You realize that your internal compass has been accurate all along, and relying on the consensus was slowing you down. This shift is quiet but profound. It begins as a subtle confidence in your own judgment. You notice patterns that others miss, instincts that feel uncomfortable to ignore, and opportunities that the crowd overlooks. When others hesitate, you act. When the group agrees on the easy choice, you consider the choice that aligns with your principles, your vision, and your growth. Outsourcing your intuition may have kept you safe, but it never made you strong, decisive, or original. There's a liberating clarity in this. You no longer second-guess yourself based on who is watching, who is advising, or what the majority believes. You learn to trust the first quiet signal inside, the instinct that doesn't need explanation or justification. It becomes a filter for every decision, from relationships to work, from personal projects to everyday interactions. You start measuring outcomes not by consensus approval, but by alignment with your own perception of what is right, necessary, or possible. This doesn't mean you reject input entirely. It means you stop letting input override your internal truth. Advice becomes perspective, not command. Opinions become reference points, not laws. And in that space, your decisions sharpen. Your energy is no longer scattered trying to reconcile conflicting voices. Instead, it's focused on action that resonates with your core. By reclaiming your intuition, you gain a power most people never develop: the ability to move through life decisively, independently, and unshakably. You begin to lead your own path rather than follow the paths others have designed for you. And in doing so, your clarity and influence grow in ways that no consensus could ever provide. Number 13. You will realize that becoming chosen is mostly about subtraction. Most people imagine being chosen as an accumulation, more recognition, more opportunities, more attention. But the truth is far less glamorous and far more powerful. Becoming chosen, in any meaningful sense, is less about what you add to your life and more about what you remove. It's about cutting out noise, distractions, and relationships that dilute your focus. It's about shedding habits, obligations, and mindsets that once seemed necessary but were secretly holding you back. The process is surgical, quiet, and relentless. You start noticing what doesn't belong. Conversations that leave you drained instead of inspired. People who thrive on your stagnation. Tasks that consume hours without impact. Social media feeds, routines, and even beliefs that no longer serve your clarity. Each removal feels like a loss at first, because subtraction always does. But with every layer you strip away, your purpose becomes sharper, your energy more concentrated, and your presence more unmistakable. This isn't about isolation. It's about alignment. You learn that fewer, more deliberate connections and commitments create far more impact than a life crowded with half-hearted participation. You stop performing for audiences that don't matter. You stop chasing approval from spaces that offer nothing in return. You create space for what truly fuels growth, depth over breadth, quality over quantity, and truth over comfort. The strange irony is that what is removed often causes the most discomfort because it's familiar. Yet, familiarity is deceptive. Just because something has always existed in your life doesn't mean it belongs there. Choosing subtraction over addition forces you to confront what is truly essential versus what is merely habitual. Once you embrace this, everything changes. Your decisions become lighter, faster, and more precise. Your energy consolidates. You begin moving through life with a purpose that is no longer diluted by excess. And in that disciplined subtraction, you realize the real power of being chosen isn't in the accumulation of external signals. It's in the clarity, focus, and intentionality that emerge when everything unnecessary has been stripped away. Number 14. You will understand that tonight isn't a transformation, it's a decision. Most people wait for change to feel like magic, expecting some sudden spark, some external force, or a dramatic shift to make them different. But tonight the truth hits. Transformation isn't a gift. It's a choice, and it starts with a single decisive decision. Nothing falls from the sky, and no one comes to announce that your time has come. The only shift is internal, quiet, and irreversible. The moment you stop negotiating with the version of yourself that clings to comfort, fear, or approval. This decision is brutal in its simplicity. It doesn't require inspiration, courage, or even readiness, just honesty. You see the patterns you've tolerated, the compromises you've made, the energy you've wasted. And instead of excusing, delaying, or ignoring them, you confront them. You tell yourself, without theatrics or guilt, that enough is enough. You stop negotiating with hesitation, indecision, or the need for external validation. That's where the true transformation begins, not in circumstance, but in resolve. From this moment on, your perception shifts. Small decisions carry weight because they're made with intention, not habit. Every action becomes a reflection of the person you've chosen to be, not the one you've been conditioned to stay as. People around you may not notice immediately. The world doesn't bow to internal decisions. But internally, you are no longer optional. You've committed to yourself in a way that cannot be reversed. This is also where discipline overtakes inspiration. You no longer wait for feelings to align or timing to be perfect. You move because the decision demands it. Momentum becomes inevitable because the choice has already been made. Your energy is no longer divided between hesitation and action. Tonight, nothing outside you changes, but everything inside does. And that internal shift, the quiet, resolute, uncompromising choice, is far more powerful than any external transformation could ever be. It is the moment you step fully into ownership of your life, and once made, there is no turning back, only forward. Conclusion. Becoming the version of yourself that the world can't ignore isn't about magic, luck, or external approval. It's about clarity, honesty, and ruthless commitment to your own growth. It's about shedding what doesn't serve you, refusing to shrink, and embracing discomfort as the price of progress. From outgrowing old habits and people, to trusting your intuition, to recognizing that comfort was the real enemy, every step is a choice, quiet, deliberate, and uncompromising. You stop waiting for permission, stop romanticizing suffering, and stop confusing busyness with progress. You stop performing for the world and start acting for yourself. The transformation is never external. It begins in your mind, your decisions, and your willingness to confront the truth about yourself. Tonight, it all comes down to a single realization. Being chosen, evolving, and stepping into your power is a matter of subtraction, clarity, and ownership. You can no longer rely on others, distractions, or hollow motivation. You move forward because you decided to, and in that decision, you discover a freedom and momentum that no external circumstance can give you. The person you become isn't louder, flashier, or dramatized. It's sharper, quieter, and unstoppable. Every choice, every action, every step is now intentional, and that is the essence of being truly unstoppable. If you resonated with this, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel for more content that challenges and empowers you. Like the video if it hit you with clarity, comment below with your thoughts or experiences, and share it with someone who's ready to face their truth. Growth isn't just personal, it's contagious, and your journey could inspire someone else to make the decision that changes everything. Stay awakened, chosen ones.